Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the From Adversity to Abundance podcast. I am your host, Jamie Bateman, and I'm pumped today to have with us Rick Warner. Rick is a real estate agent and the co-founder of Flowcademy. Rick, thanks for joining us today. How are you doing?
I am doing well, Jamie. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I am very excited.
Yeah, this is going to be awesome. You and I were chatting beforehand, and we just had to hit record because we were getting into too much good stuff. So
exactly, that's right. That's right.
Need the listener to hear this stuff. So Rick, I touched on it briefly, but tell the listener who you are today and what you're up to today.
So who I am today is 20 years in the real estate business and having enjoyed some success. That's like what I do, but who I am is all about trying to find people I can help. And that's more in my coaching business, Flowcademy, where we focus right now on real estate people, but we're actually opening it up to just kind of overall coaching, mainly for small businesses. I have 4 kids, ranging from 34 years old down to 16.
Wow.
I'm in this really great relationship. We get to travel a lot. I actually have become kind of the guy that I used to hate. I like to tell some people, like,
interesting.
I have this really great, semi-normal but amazing life, with a lot of flexibility and a lot of financial freedom. So I'm very fortunate.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I know it wasn't always that way, but that's interesting. I'm curious to dive into that later. As far as, was that your own projecting before, and when you hated that guy that you now are?
Totally. Exactly. So when I say the guy you used to hate, what I mean is the guy that I used to hate at the very least. Maybe everybody else admired the guy, but I'm the guy. I didn't even, well, we can get into it. There was a lot of stuff about who I used to be. That was not amazing.
Well, I know you've been through some stuff for sure. A couple of key pieces or examples of adversity that we touched on before we hit record. But talk to us. Let's dive into your backstory, Rick. Where do you want to start? I know at 20 years old, you were at a real low point. So maybe we should start there.
Sure. Yeah. And I would like to say too, when I heard the name of your podcast, I'm like, that's where I belong, because adversity has been not only at the center of my life, but I would say at the center of my success. In other words, every time that I was facing something really, really challenging, and there's been multiple of those, we'll talk about a couple of the main ones today, that when they happen, I'm like, this is terrible. This isn't right. This can't be good, all that. And having, overcome those adversities, the version of me that came out the other side was so much bigger, right? And so much more capable, and all the things that I don't look, and this is where we started earlier, where it's like, I don't look at those things as something that were bad. I just don't. I mean, they were experiences that were difficult, but they led me to much, much bigger things. So awesome. Going back to what you were talking about. So when I was 20 years old, even though I was brought up in a great family, my dad was a pastor, my mom was a school teacher, we're, kind of lower middle class. We didn't have a ton of money, but lots of love in the family, all the things. Somehow I ended up at the age of 20 years old being the father of a 1-year-old boy from a high school relationship, being addicted to drugs and alcohol, and living in a tool shed behind the driving range where I worked. And really, there was a point in there, if you'd asked me how things were going, I just said, pretty good. This is the world I've created for myself, because I started living this weird world, this weird kind of alter reality of what was important. And what was important to me at that time was getting loaded, period. That was it. That was my sole purpose. Everything I did was, how do I get loaded or recover from being loaded so I could get loaded again? And I thought that was totally okay. Like, I like it better. In fact, I felt bad for people who didn't know what it was like to get loaded or be loaded all the time. You know what I mean?
Interesting. Yeah. So in some sense, you're living in the moment and taking it day by day, like
right.
people say.
Exactly. Yeah. I remember people saying that. I'm like, I totally live for the moment,
So, we don't have to dive in too much on why you got there, how, but why were you covering up for for pain from, you know, the
Yeah.
past? I'm not trying to overanalyze things here
No.
you know, but why do you think it was that you said you had a loving household, you know, growing up? Why do you think you kind of ended up living in the tool shed addicted to drugs?
Yeah, it's a great question. One I don't know the answer to. I mean, I can
Mm,
tell you that um, certainly there's things as I've gone through my life where I've discovered about myself that are,
sure.
that are raw spots, that are things that tend to put me into some kind of survival role where I'll behave in a way that isn't maybe my highest self, I like to call it.
Sure.
And so all those things exist, but at the end of the day, I couldn't deal with life on life's terms, whatever that meant.
Mm,
And my solution to dealing with life on life's terms
hmm
was that if I got loaded, I didn't have to feel it. So really,
mm,
I just wanted to be anesthetized. I didn't want any feelings, good or
hmm
bad, right?
I see.
I wanted everything to be just blotto.
Kind of numb.
And
Yep.
so I
Yep.
remember thinking regularly, if I could just be loaded all the time, I really
Mm,
believe that. And can you imagine what kind of limiting existence that was for me? And obviously, who am I showing up for everybody else? I mean, I can't
sure.
even imagine how useless I was, but that's really what happened.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I don't, and we, it's funny because the people that ended up, so what ended up, just really quick, what ended up happening was I had this one night where for all of a sudden I could see myself for who I really was, what was really
Mm,
going on, my life for, not the crazy, like, this is great, you guys should, you should come join me, to
yeah.
what happened, bro? And you're not going to make it. And how did you end up this way? And
Mm,
you have a son, and you don't even, you're not showing up for him. You're barely around,
mm,
all the things. And is
hmm
this, what's his life going to be like?
Sure. So
And
so
so
what
I
led
had
you
that.
to that point, if you don't mind me? Was it was
Well,
just
what led me to that point was being up for 3 days
I
without any
see.
sleep, having too many things in my body.
Hmm
And then
Gotcha.
my heart was kind of pounding out of my chest. I thought I'd OD'd. I was
Mm,
super paranoid. So I was like
mm,
looking out the louver blinds, looking for the
mm,
cops coming or the mafia. Like I had all kinds of crazy things, helicopters flying over. Like it
mm,
was not good.
sure.
And that it was around that very same time when I'm like, and I also knew that I had similar experiences before, and that I was going to wake up the next day and not have any memory of how
Mm,
horrible that experience was, and I was going to do it again.
mm,
And I
I
was
see.
like, this is going to be my life, until I'm dead. And
Sure.
so the next day, I was lucky enough to go get help.
Mm,
That was November 18th, 1989, and the people that I met there at this place where I could get help,
hmm
they changed my life. What they
mm,
offered, who they were, or what they did, it changed my life.
mm.
And so, so there's your adversity. And
Yeah,
then,
for sure.
yeah.
Yes. So so what were the next you know, I guess what tools did those people give you to start to turn your life around?
Yeah. So, first of all, they gave me some camaraderie around. They had been where I was, and they were no
Mm,
longer there. So they had some kind of legitimacy, and
sure.
that's why I think your program is so good. What makes your program great is people are talking about their own challenges and struggles, and that
Yeah,
makes other people go, "Oh, good. Okay, I'm not the only one that's feeling this
absolutely.
way." Or here's a guy that had that feeling, and now he's not there anymore. So
That's right.
that is built into that
Yeah.
that
So
program.
they've got credibility because they've been
They've
there.
got credibility instantaneously. No,
Sure.
it's not a cop. It's not my mom. It's not my girlfriend. It's not,
Right.
the authorities telling me. It's not a psychologist. It's not anybody telling me you should get better.
Sure.
It's these people going, "Hey, I've been right where you are, and I'm no longer there, and it's really great. Come with us." Right?
Yeah. So you can see it's a proof of concept. You can see what success looks like from someone
Exactly.
who's actually done it. So
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there was
okay.
an instant attraction for me to who these people were.
Sure.
And that was really important because the things they were going to ask me to do in terms
Mm,
of, self-development were not going to
yeah.
be things that made sense or that I really wanted to do.
You
And
sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So I needed to have that connection. And again, same thing with anything. If somebody's going to be asking you to do something, it's better if they've done it themselves, right? Where,
Yeah.
and that you're really attracted to them. So that was my experience. They asked me to do some things from a personal development standpoint through a 12-step program.
hmm
So that's like taking an inventory of yourself.
hmm
It's like really looking at where your shortcomings are, making amends for things that you've already done. And
Sure.
all of that was to create a relationship with a power greater than myself. And I know it's not a
hmm
religious program. I'm not religious,
Yeah.
but I'm definitely a spiritual guy. So
Sure.
all of that led me to some kind of spiritual,
Yeah.
understanding, spirit in the universe, call it God, whatever you want, that
Yeah.
I could rely on unconditionally.
Sure.
And so that whole thing that I just described has been the foundation for everything else for me.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And you know, whether it's through a 12-step program or not, we've had a similar theme from through, you know, through the show with a lot of different guests, as far as not the same exact story you have, but the same kind of principles, where and similar journey, where they have to get introspective and work on themselves.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stay there. It doesn't stop there. You already talked
Right.
about, you know, looking upward, or to God, or, you know, to spiritual, you know, something bigger than yourself, and looking toward others. And I imagine the rest of your story is largely focused on others. And so I think there's just kind of a natural kind of progression there, and evolution, if you will, to, you know, during that transformation that I think kind of everyone goes through who's gone from adversity to abundance. So, you know, walk us through kind of the next, you know, say 5 years, you know, after that rock bottom period, the 12 weeks, then what happens?
Yeah. So the next 5 years was really just immersed in that whole thing. Like I was not,
Gotcha.
I had jobs, I did whatever, but really it was just focused on that work. And actually, I would say the next 12 years was actually that for me. Now, it doesn't have to
Okay.
be that for everybody. That's just
Sure.
how it worked out for me. It became a
Yeah.
lifestyle, became what I was immersed in. But somewhere in there, you know, I got married, I started having kids, and then it's like, okay, hey, you got to make a living. And so,
Absolutely.
so somewhere in there, that came into play, where I really needed to focus more on, you know, being an adult. I don't want that doesn't sound right, but
Yeah. I mean,
I
there's
need to focus
responsibility
more
there.
on, I couldn't just live in that world, right? I needed
Sure.
to be out in the world and be a contributing member of society, and
Yeah.
create, you know, find out how to make a living and all that stuff. So
Yeah, well, and I think life has seasons, right? It's not just,
totally.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know, you might volunteer at a church for 10 years or
Right.
something, and that's
Exactly.
great, and that's fantastic, and people should do that. But at
Yes.
some
Yeah.
point, maybe that's not what you should be doing anymore. So,
Right. Or at
um,
least it's not your entire identity, right? Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So now your identity shifts to being more of a family man. You've got
Right.
kids. You're like, oh, I need to make some money. So,
Right.
so professionally, then what did your focus look like?
Well, so I was a financial advisor for a while. Yeah, so I did that for maybe 5 years, got held up in the dot-com bomb. And it
Mm,
was that industry, if there's any financial advisors listening, Series
mm,
7 guys, like it was right when the whole industry was going from commission-based to fee-based, and they
mhm,
didn't really look. At the end of the day, I didn't do what it took to succeed in that business. I
mm.
give you a whole bunch of other reasons, but at the end of the day, I didn't do what
Yeah,
needed to happen.
sure.
And
Gotcha.
so I kind of fell into real estate, which I think like 95% of the people that are in real estate, they basically end up there, right? Rarely
Yeah.
do I come across people like, I went to college, and when I was going to grow up, I was going
Yeah.
to be a realtor. You know what I mean?
No. No,
It just doesn't.
my father's still a realtor. He's been an agent for, I don't know, many decades. And
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and he was very successful with it, and did a
Yeah.
good job. But it, you know, he went to some good colleges, and you know, did not plan to be an agent.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I was lucky. It was 2004 when I got licensed, so almost 20 years ago. The real estate market was crazy.
Sure. Yep.
And
Yep.
you know, I had some immediate success, and I was like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be, you know.
Sure.
And it was just good enough for me to buy $1 million house back when $1 million house was actually like a big deal.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, I've arrived,
Y-
you know. And then
Sure.
2000 September of 2008 happens.
Yep.
And you know, for those listeners who don't know, if you were in real estate, if you owned real estate, if you had any attachment to real estate,
Yeah.
it was brutal. It was a really brutal time for everybody.
a-
But
Absolutely.
if you owned real estate and you were in the real estate business, it was even worse. And
All your
so
eggs were in the real estate basket. Yep.
all the eggs, that's right.
Yeah.
And so our $1 million house was worth like 650 grand, which ate up basically our entire down payment that we had put
Mhm.
up. And on September of 2009, which is my 40th birthday, I had planned to go to Las Vegas with my now 21-year-old son, right? And it was going to be great. And we'd been planning it for, you know, like a year. Hey, when I turn, you know, it'll be great. I'll be 40, you'll be 21. It'll be, and here we
Mhm.
are. And not only can I not go to Las Vegas, I can't pay
Yeah.
my mortgage. and all
Wow.
of my lines of credit are burned up or have been withdrawn from the bank. My
Yeah.
credit cards are maxed out. And because the business had started to go down, I'm behind in my taxes. Like, I've got
Yeah.
it all barreling down on me.
Wow.
And the only solution seems to be sell the house. The
But you,
problem is that if we sell
yeah,
the house, we lose everything. We lock in that loss, right?
sure.
And then I start going, well, okay, where can I make? And I think my nut at the time was like 10 grand a month. Where can I
Mm.
make 10 grand a month? Nowhere. I couldn't. It was just wasn't,
Yeah,
I couldn't, I didn't have the skills. I didn't have the resume. I had nothing that
sure.
lined me up. And I certainly couldn't go to my parents, because if they were like, you spend $10,000 a month,
Right.
they
Right.
would have disowned me as their kid,
Yeah.
right?
But I mean, but and just to, did did you make some mistakes? Sure. But for those maybe the younger listeners out there who it's easy to pile on and say, well, yeah, I wouldn't get into that situation. Of course I wouldn't.
Yeah.
You were not the only one in that situation either. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
like you said, the whole world kind of crashed, especially the real estate world, which is what you were in,
Yeah.
in many ways. So, maybe you should have done some things differently. This isn't me judging. I'm just saying, yeah, looking back, it's easy to say, well, I shouldn't have bought that house. I shouldn't have relied on these commission checks to assume they would go, stay consistent going forward. But at the same time, nobody saw that coming. I mean, they were handing out loans to anyone who could fog a mirror.
I could tell
I
you
mean,
stories of loans that you would not believe. But I think the
yeah,
point though is, kind of keeping it online with your podcast,
yeah,
one way or the other, whether you're facing adversity by your own hand or by circumstances or a combination of both, which it usually is
yeah,
what it is.
yeah,
Certainly I had a part and I was responsible for those circumstances. And
sure.
yes, it's also true that there was an economic crisis, the biggest meltdown the country had seen since the Great Depression. And so that
Yeah.
mattered as well.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
none of that really mattered, because
It,
I was in the circumstance
yes,
and I needed to
exactly.
deal with it,
you
right?
you got to deal with real life and the situation you're in, and
That's right.
regardless of what caused this, how did I get here, that's fine to look at and talk about, but that's where you are. That's the
That's where you are.
situation
And
you're in.
so, and I think that the reason I want to highlight that is, if you're
Yeah,
listening and if you're an entrepreneur, you're having some adversity, whether it's in a relationship or in
yeah,
business or financially, whatever it is, don't spend too much time on it's not fair, it shouldn't have happened, or the reasons. Like, what's to me way more important is to figure out, well, what are you going to do about it? Right?
absolutely.
What is the next right thing to do? You can do recon work later when you look back and go, wow, yeah, man, I should have, but at the end of the day, right now, it's like, what is the next right thing to do? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, it's not going to serve your family for you to sit around the house wallowing for 6 months trying to figure out how you got here.
Right.
You
Exactly.
know that there's a time for that, but the next thing is, like you said, the right next step. What is that? What was that for you? What did
Yeah.
you find?
So the next right thing for me was, well, the first of all, I just want to say that you can imagine I'm sitting there with all of that piled up, and for days or weeks, I really don't remember how long, I would be on my couch at night, my wife next to me. We had 3 little kids, and then I had my older one, and it was like an elephant sitting on my chest. And
Mm,
I didn't really, I'm like, who do I even go to with this? You know what I
mm-hmm,
mean? So I felt
mm-hmm,
super alone and
mm,
super overwhelmed and all that.
mm-hmm,
And the answer was, there was no other business that could get me out of it.
mm-hmm,
And that there was no person that I could go to that was going to get me out of it. The
mm-hmm.
entire thing was up to me. And for me, I was already in the right business. I had to be better at what I already knew how to do.
Mm.
And
Okay.
so I sought out a coaching program through the company that I worked for. It was $800. It was an 8-week, one whole day of,
Hmm.
or how do I say it? And then every Monday for 8 weeks for 8
I see.
hours
Got it.
was this class. And I was like, I didn't have $800. And I'm
Hmm.
like, I
Sure.
even called around to the country because it was a national program. I called people who had taken it. And I'm like, hey, is this thing for real?
Is it
Because
worth it?
I
Yeah.
cannot waste $800
Sure.
and, whatever that is, 64 hours of time. And
Yeah.
this one woman, I remember her name was Sarah. She goes, Rick, just do it. And going back to the whole thing of, the experience of others, I had talked with her. I liked her. She sounded like she knew what she was talking about. I believed her.
Sure.
And then I took the action.
Yeah.
And that 8-week program made all the difference in the world. I really had to accept the idea that I had not done anything amazing to become a great realtor. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to say I've gotten lucky, but I I
Hmm.
kind of have was getting by on, some
Yeah,
charm and, whatever, but not
sure.
actual hard work and getting in there and doing lead generation
Yeah,
and
I
figuring.
mean, and now like there are a lot of real estate investors who have done really well in the last 10, 15 years, and some of that is genius on their part and just very expertise, but some of that is riding the wave of the economy. So like you said, both things are true. I mean, I'm sure you deserve some of the success and earned a lot of the success that you had, but a lot of that maybe was right place at the right time, and then here you are. But it sounds like you had never really invested in yourself to get
Correct.
better at your craft. You just
Yeah, I didn't even know that was a thing, right? I
Mhm.
just thought, well, you just because a lot of times, and I would imagine if you're an entrepreneur, there's probably a little bit of that, like I'm on an island out here.
Oh
There's
yeah, for
nobody.
sure.
Who do I go to? How do I learn what's next and all that? And I was
Absolutely.
in my early, well, I just turned 40, so I was in my 40s, my late 30s when I got
Okay.
into the business.
Yeah.
And yeah, so having somebody say, do this. Now, here's the other part. Like I remember the very first class, one of their things was, we want you to call people and we want you to say this. And it was a script. And I'm like, well, I don't do scripts. And not only did they want us to do that, but we were going to
Yeah.
do it right there. There was 200 people in this room and we were doing it right there with everybody around. I'm like,
Right.
no, I need to have a private room and I need to think about
Right.
every call for 15 minutes before I
Right.
make it. I had all these things and I had to learn how to be uncomfortable, or I need to learn how to be comfortable outside of my comfort zone, right? We've
Mm,
heard that 1,000 times. I had never heard
absolutely.
it at that point. And
Sure.
so being willing to, push the envelope of what I now call my working edges.
Okay.
The working edges are those places where you that it frightens you. You see emotional pain on the other side of it.
Mm,
And because of that, you go, well, I'm not going to go do that, whatever that is.
sure.
And the more I can lean into those emotional, working edges,
Hmm.
there's some big rewards on the other side of that if I can get through that, right?
Hmm.
And
That's really
we talk
good.
about
Yeah.
mental health and all that. And
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
so
That's
that
really good because you're not, I mean, looking back, you weren't throwing caution to the wind and reinventing yourself in an entirely new industry. And, you're still leaning on the skills you already had and the
right.
experience you had,
Yeah.
but you're pushing the envelope of what you're comfortable with. And you were willing to be humble and take the advice and do what you didn't want to do. I mean, so
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. And
That's right.
you're definitely right about just entrepreneurs in general. I am one. It's very easy to not be connected, to other people, and it's very easy to just kind of do your thing and feel like you are on an island. And entrepreneurship can be a pretty lonely place if you're not careful, if you're not intentional about plugging yourself into a mastermind or coaching program or some other, whether it's paid or not, some community of like-minded individuals. And
That's
so
right.
I do think that's critical for
Yeah.
the entrepreneur.
Mentorship is another way to look at it too, right?
Yeah,
Having a mentor. Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. So okay, you were doing this on Mondays. Actually, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Did you ever, and I know you're in an entirely different life situation, 20 years after your shed, homeless
Yeah.
situation,
By
but
the way, it was almost exactly 20 years, right?
okay.
From the shed to the I can't pay my mortgage. Oh,
Okay.
within 2 months of 20 years. But yeah.
Was there ever, I mean, was there ever any inclination to ever kind of go back and not into a shed or anything, but I'm saying
Oh, but
like,
just to get drunk or
yeah, get
loaded or
drunk
do
or
drugs.
high, exactly, and
Yeah.
escape the
Yeah.
whole thing at that point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, great question. Not at all.
Okay.
I was very fortunate in that moment. Now I will tell you that a few years later, um, ironically or whatever, with having gotten out of that,
Hmm.
that there was that moment did happen. And it
Mm.
wasn't a moment, unfortunately, it lasted for 2.5 years. And I'm
Mm.
happy to talk about that too. But
Gotcha.
let me just
Yeah. Yeah.
connect the dots.
Yeah.
So I go to that program, I do the things they tell me to do, and I start having success directly as a result of that.
Mm.
Just like when
That's
I went
awesome.
to the 12-step program and I had direct results. So it was like it's like, oh, I get it. The more I ask
Yeah.
for help, the more I follow the people that are doing the thing that I want to do, the better my life gets in whatever area it is that I'm trying to get better, right?
That's
Or
awesome. Yeah.
there's that idea too of like if you want to know what your life is like, just check out who the five people you spend the most time around, right? That's
Absolutely. And
um
again, you weren't the first successful real estate agent to ever, to do this and have success, right? So you weren't the
Exactly.
first, you weren't
I didn't have,
creating
right. I
this.
wasn't the one breaking any ground. I was
No,
the follower. I was the
right.
follower for sure.
But
Yeah.
I think that can be hard for entrepreneurs and agents or salespeople who they kind of don't want to be told what to do. You know, maybe the type A person who you were working for yourself essentially for years before
100%.
that.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's
Yeah.
really, you know, it is humbling and it's hard to do. So,
But
but you
that
were
is part of the working edge, by the way, right? That
okay.
idea, I
Sure.
don't want to work from. I mean, all these things are entirely in our head. Why didn't I want to make the phone calls? Because I was afraid how somebody was going to react to me. That's entirely in my head. You know,
Sure.
everything that I'm afraid of is entirely in my head,
Love
right?
that. Yeah. Okay.
And
So,
so, yeah,
yep.
so I
So you
had the
start to have
success,
success. Yep. Yep.
started having success, and so I just started building on that, just repeating those things, being bigger, getting more coaching, hiring a coach, and constantly pushing that envelope. And so I went from, you know, not being able to pay my mortgage in 2009 to 2012. I was top 3 in our 170 person office. I had paid off all of our taxes, all of our debt. I only, by the way, I only missed one. I didn't miss a payment, but I was 30 days late on that one payment in September.
Gotcha.
So it didn't affect our credit. And in 2014, I was number 1 in our 170 person office. And it's
awesome.
Basically from a real estate standpoint, and in that place, I've been able to maintain that high level of productivity. And none of that would have happened had I not had the adversity that I had in September 2009.
Yeah, because you wouldn't have been as hungry and willing to reach out for help and
to do something differently. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So now, what kind of coach was it? A real estate agent coach, or was it what kind of coach did you
Yeah, so all my coaches were all real estate people.
Gotcha.
And that's, you know, there's 2 ways to go. There are business coaches that probably would have been sufficient as well.
Sure.
You know, there's so much overlap, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, most of us who are entrepreneurs, which I would put agents in that category, are probably good at that thing, right? Like I really know how to negotiate a deal and write a contract and help people look for houses and blah, blah, blah. But how do I go get clients, right? So if I'm an accountant, if I'm a computer guy, if I'm like whoever, if I'm in the business of needing clients, and I know how to do the thing that I'm good at, but if I don't know how to get clients, for example, then I need to go help. I need to find somebody that can help me get clients, however that is.
Absolutely. Totally. You can't be good at everything. And yeah, couldn't agree more. So if you're comfortable, you went from not being able to pay your mortgage to what, as far as income? Are you willing to share any of that?
You want me to throw a number at you?
Only what you're comfortable with.
Gosh, this is my first podcast where anybody asked me that. So I would say, a bad year for me is $500,000 in revenue, and I've had a couple years in the $750,000 year.
That's awesome. No, I mean, you're not bragging. I asked you for it. So that's awesome. I mean, because it is hard because, we hear guests and it's like, yeah, I went through a hard time and now I'm in abundance. Well, what does that mean? Right. And of course, and of course, I know that your abundance story is not just about how much money you make. I know it's bigger than that, but that's a real number. And that's, those are big numbers. So that's kudos to you. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, okay. So kind of what has the last maybe 5 years look like for you?
Okay. So actually, it's funny. 5 years is a perfect number to ask me about, because what happened 5 years ago was I read a book called The 4 Agreements. And I don't know if you've read that one or not, but and to be honest, it doesn't have to have been the 4 Agreements. It was just that I was at that right time in my life where I was like, there's got to be something more here on an emotional, mental, to your point earlier. Okay, here I am. I'm making a lot of money, but I'm not really that happy. Something's missing. And so for the last 5 years, it's been all about personal development more than anything. And within that personal development, it started with reading this book, 4 Agreements. If you're listening, or if you haven't, it is a really great, super easy, principle driven book. But that got me started on that whole personal development place, where you could make the argument that for the last, at that point, whatever, 28 years, I had been doing personal development through 12-step work and all that, because I continued to do that. But this was to kind of go beyond that and look at more some causes and conditions, and it's the way I react to life, and the things that, what triggers me, and or different ways of looking at how other people behave or react, or, paying or learning about how your brain works, the prefrontal cortex versus the amygdala and the fight or
Yeah.
flight and the wise, mature self and all. Like, there's just so much great
Yeah.
stuff. And I'm a seeker. Like, I'm a seeker of, I want to feel better. I want to react better to people. I want to be of more service to other people. The more I'm in myself, I'm in my fear, my resentments, or my selfishness, then I'm really not able to be helpful to anybody else. On the other hand, if I can relieve myself of those things, which
Sure.
that's where I tend to drift to without any spiritual connection, without any help. I just kind of live in selfishness and dishonesty and resentment and fear.
Yeah.
And that's a very small world to live in.
Yeah.
And so for the
Sure.
last 5 years, it's been all about that.
That's awesome. I mean, like you said, when you were in the shed, you were isolated. You weren't a positive influence on probably, too many
Nobody.
people.
Yeah.
Nobody.
Exactly.
And so
There was nobody going, hey, I want to go hang out with Rick.
But I mean, now the Rick Warner that you've turned into it's just awesome. And I'm sure you have bad days. I'm sure you have hangups. I'm sure you're not perfect.
Yeah, of course.
So practically speaking, and we can't unpack all of it, but what are you doing today? Not necessarily this date, but today, this week, this month, that you weren't doing, say, 3-4 years ago from a personal development standpoint?
Yeah, right. So I would say two things. One is I have a consistent model for a good day for me. And that includes, things that have nothing to do with business. So meditation for sure. What am I putting into my body? And listen, I'm not like a health freak. I'm not constantly but I do pay attention to it. I cut out a lot of the sugar that I was eating and things like that. I exercise regularly. I was never, ever an exercise guy. So about 4 years ago, I started running, which is its own funny story that I won't take too much time on your podcast. But I was 100% reluctant runner. The girl that I had just started dating invited me for a run, and I'm like, that's dumb. But she was cute, so I went. And then it was terrible. And she goes, how did you like it? And I'm like, yeah, it was good. Yeah, I loved it. And so she goes, good, we're doing a 5K. I'm like, a 5K, what is that, like 100 miles? And so anyway, we did a 5K like 4 days later. And that got me going. Kind of like because I'm super competitive, as you probably figured out. And so, the 5K turned into a 10K, the 10K turned into a half marathon. Then we went through the whole pandemic. So all the races got stopped, but my goal was to do a marathon. So as soon as the pandemic was over, I ran the Chicago Marathon, then I ran the New York Marathon. And then just 5 days ago, or on Sunday, I ran the San Francisco Marathon. And each one of those has been, its own journey because of, I'm so competitive. I wanted a certain time and blah, blah. But the point is that within the context of that, I become this runner and other fitness stuff, working out, group fitness and so forth. And with that has come this crazy emotional, like shield from anxiety and fear. I live on a totally different level purely because of the exercise. So I've got this physical benefit from exercising. Obviously lost 30 weight. My body looks pretty good, but better than that is the emotional part that I've got, which you could have told me 1,000 times. I mean, I bet you there's people listening to this podcast right now going, I don't care. Right. But
we've had Matt Izzo on the show twice. He's a younger guy who's lost 75 pounds. He lost 75 pounds 3 times, but the third time, and he's kept it off for 6 or 7 years now. And he's done an Ironman now.
Oh my gosh.
So you got something to compete with.
No,
now,
I know it's in there.
but he talks a lot about the emotional benefits to all this and how he's addressed done so much emotional work along with the physical work.
That's right.
But the other thing I want to point out too is that, it's not like you set out, because I think for a lot of listeners, it can be overwhelming to hear, I've got to do emotional work and I've got to do the train for a marathon now. And, but you said it came alongside that. You didn't expect all the ancillary emotional benefits that came along with the physical benefits. So it kind of all falls into place if you have that one that you start taking action toward that first goal. Would you say that's fair?
I would say that's fair. Also, I would just put it under the 1 day at a time category. So whatever. So if you go back all the way to when I first got sober, Obviously that was one day at a time. They're the one that coined the phrase, right?
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
the one day at a time thing just works for everything that you're trying to do, at least for me. I'm a guy
Mhm.
that easily gets overwhelmed, who
Mhm.
easily gets afraid or whatever, or wants to shut down and not do anything.
Mhm.
That's me. Like, so if you're listening to this and you go, God, this guy's super disciplined, that's not
Right.
true. I've learned how to be disciplined, but this
Mhm.
has happened over a long period of time.
Mhm.
Can I share about the daily navigator thing I was
Yeah, let's
telling you
do it.
about earlier?
Absolutely.
So because I'm not disciplined and because I have all these great ideas and then I don't follow up with any of them, and because I'm
Mhm.
ADD and all the other things, I had to create, I didn't have to, I got to. I was lucky enough that while I was running one day,
Mhm.
after having years of like, man, if I meditated every day, that would be amazing. Gosh, if I called 10 people a day, that would be really cool. Man, if I did, like I had
Right.
all
I should
these,
do this. One day
I
I'm going to
should do
do
that.
that.
Yeah, I was shitting all over myself, right?
Right, right.
And
Sure.
so I created this list of those things that if I did them on a mostly regular basis, not necessarily every single day, but basically most days.
Mhm.
And then if I checked the box off on the list that morning and said, okay, these are the things. Now I'm looking at this today. Today is, what is today? Thursday? Is
Yes.
that right?
Yes.
So today's Thursday. It's the 20, whatever it is, the 27th. So
Yeah.
Thursday, the 27th on my list is this, here's all the things I'm going to do. Am I choosing to meditate today? Yeah, I'm going to meditate. I'm going to drink my greens. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to read a spiritual book. But I'm not going to journal today. So I don't check that box. And then here in my personal thing, I'm going to call 10 people. I'm going to meet 3 people face to face. I'm going to write some thank you cards and I'm blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
I decide that every day in this daily navigator. I sign it like a contract every day. This is my must do list. And if I'm
Mhm.
not planning, if I don't know that I can get that done that day, then I don't check the box, right? If I have a day where I'm filled with meetings or I can't, whatever.
Sure.
But because I'm looking at that with, this is going to happen. This isn't a hope list. This isn't a to-do list.
Right.
It's a must-do list. So I take a picture of it and I send it out to my accountability group. The accountability
Okay.
group is made up of 3 kinds of people: a mentor, a coach, a manager, somebody that's kind of above me that I'm,
Sure. You're like
working towards.
aspiring to be like, yep.
Exactly. A peer, somebody that's on par with me, with they're
Yep.
doing similar things. We're doing this thing together, kind of thing. And then
Yep.
also a mentee, somebody I'm trying to be a good example to, right? That
Mm.
I'm the leader for, that I'm showing them, hey, this is how I do it. So I
Sure.
send it out, boom, take a picture. It goes on this group where we're all on it, in a WhatsApp group. And then as I go through the day and I start getting distracted by my emotions or some unexpected thing or whatever, and I get off track, I go back to my list and I go, what is my next right thing to do here? Because this is what I decided this morning was important. And really nothing's changed. These things
Right.
still need to happen.
Right.
Get it
Yeah.
done. And then I check all the boxes. There's a little mini gratitude, 3 things I'm grateful for, which I really spend time on. What am I grateful for? What are the things I take for granted? Man, I could walk, right? Or I can
Yeah,
smell
absolutely.
stuff,
Yeah.
or you know what I mean? Or that I have access to clean drinking water. Sometimes it's a person that helped me that day, whatever it is. And then a
Yeah.
mini journal, I struggled with this today, or
Yeah.
God, I had this epiphany, or I had to relearn this today. And then I
Sure.
take another picture of it and I send it back out of the accountability group and I'm done. And I do that every single day that I want to be held accountable. And
Yeah.
now I've been doing that for about 4 years. And
That's
my
awesome.
efficiency of can you imagine if you meditated every single day or basically every
Yeah.
day, what
Yeah.
that would do for your mindset? Or if you exercised, 5
Yeah.
days a week, what that would do for you emotionally?
Well, that's
So you
actually
get
what
it.
yeah, no, I just wanted to that because one of the things that, one of the maybe criticisms that might pop up, or maybe criticism is not the right word, but reason I can't do that, right? Or is I don't have time to do everything that Rick's talking about. So,
Right.
because it does sound like a lot if you're
It
not
does. I
in
know.
it.
This is
So,
so funny. Yeah.
but I'd love to know, how has it affected your business, your income, your family life, your energy levels, which I think is critical. How has this discipline or this routine, and this program that you've built and worked through, how has it affected the rest of your life?
Well, actually, first, let me address the question that you have, because that's everybody's question, right? Everybody's thing is, that's ridiculous. Who would do that every day? I don't have time. I don't even have time for what I'm doing now. You think I can do
Right.
that? Right. I mean, that's
Exactly.
basically the
Exactly.
conversation.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And so
what do you
what
say
I
to
would
that?
say is that is exactly why you need to have this, right?
Sure.
Because whatever it is that you're doing right now, there's this thing we have in our coaching business. It's called an efficiency calendar. Anybody can create one of these. I'm sure there's some online. And basically, have you ever done this? It's like,
No,
okay, so it's basically it's a day printed out and it's broken down into 15-minute increments. And what you do is you write down what you do as you're going, you go, oh, I did this for the last 15 minutes.
Sure.
Anybody who does an efficiency calendar, almost anybody realizes that they waste about 4 hours a day doing nothing, right? Doing busy work, checking, being distracted by stuff, not paying attention, reading emails, going on Facebook, whatever it is. And so what I would say
it's just like anything. It's like if you're looking at your budget and nobody wants to budget, and that's not fun, but you need to take an inventory of your income and your expenses if you actually want to see where you are. Same thing with your diet. If you actually want to know what you're eating, you actually have to do an inventory of what you are eating, because you don't know, you don't actually know unless you track it. So you're taking a snapshot of your time, which is our most valuable resource, of how you're spending your time every day, and you're realizing there's so much fluff here and so much wasted time.
Exactly.
And then what do you do?
All we're doing with this thing is we're making sure that if we're going to be out there being busy and doing things, that we're targeting the things that we know are important to us. So to make sure at least those things get done. Because there's this law, which is all work expands to the time allowed, right? So if you have, X amount of things to do, in fact, you can prove the law every time you go on vacation. How crazy efficient are you the day or two before you go on vacation? Like, you're just getting stuff done. You're taking names, you know what I mean? Like, it's all done. It's the same exact thing that happens with this daily navigator every single day, but it is a 1 day at a time deal, right? So we're not saying do this forever. We're saying do it today, right? Make this decision to be this efficient today. And when you get to tomorrow, you can decide what you're going to do with tomorrow.
Absolutely. I think Parkinson's law might be something the listener should Google. But so it sounds like then it sounds like you actually had plenty of free time. You didn't realize you had plenty of time to implement these things.
Right. So
And
I didn't even answer your question.
How's it
impacted me? Yeah. So let me give you an idea. So last year, this is what my 2022, right? I woke up in Cartagena. I'd already been in Colombia for a week. I was going to be there for another week. And then 2 months later, I was in Italy with my girlfriend visiting my daughter in college. And then the next month, I was in Washington, D.C. and New York with my son, taking him to, what would have been an 8th grade class he didn't get because of COVID. And then I was in Palm Springs, San Diego, back to New York for the marathon. I really don't work more than 40 hours a week. In fact, I usually work less than 40 hours a week. I rarely work nights. I rarely work weekends. I have a closeness with my family that's never been there before. I have a lot of freedom around time and money that I just never had before. I feel really good. Physically, I've never been in such good shape. That's awesome. I don't, I mean, does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure you have challenging days, but it sounds like you truly are living in abundance in many, many ways. And the time that you found to prioritize the self-development things that you talked about have only impacted you in a positive way.
And you've said this a couple of times. I'm sure you have bad days. I want to be super clear to the listener. I have bad days all the time. I have bad moments. I have bad hours. And certainly I have bad days. I would say that most of the time when that happens, that it is an emotional issue for me, that is an opportunity for me to learn or be different. It's rarely about them, although the very first thing my brain wants to do is blame everybody else or blame the circumstances, but rarely is that the case. Almost always it's something about me that I find unacceptable. One of those working edges, like I was talking about, that if I go in there and really do the work, like, what is this? What is driving me crazy right now? Why am I reacting like this? Being curious with myself is going to allow for a much bigger life. The more I'm out there pointing at everybody else, the less chance I have of getting any real solution.
Love it. It's fantastic. All right. I've got some rapid fire questions for you, Rick. Are you ready?
Yeah.
What is one thing that people...
Oh, sorry.
How many beers did you have last night? No, I'm kidding. That was a joke. What do people misunderstand about you?
Oh, wow. I think my intensity, throws people off. I don't know if that's misunderstanding, but I can be pretty intense. And I think some people, like, apparently I might have resting bitch face. I'm not sure if Zoom has really helped me understand that but I think that I'm so intense sometimes that people are like, I think he's mad at me. And I'm not mad at anybody.
Right. Why does he hate me?
Yeah.
If you could go back and give your 18-year-old self some advice, what would that be?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So it would be, dude, you are loved.
Mm, that's
You know,
really good.
you're already
That's really good.
enough. You know, already enough. Yeah.
Love that. It's awesome. If you could have coffee with any historical figure, they could still be alive today, who would you choose?
Oh man. Did I get these? I feel like I should have had a
No,
list.
no. So I
You do
like to
this on
keep.
purpose?
Yeah, I do. I do. I'll be honest.
Um,
We can edit things out. We
Martin
probably
Luther
won't.
King. Martin Luther King.
Okay, great answer. If you were given $10 million tomorrow, what would you do with it?
Uh, I I would. So I've thought about this actually before. I would love to take, if I could have if I had like a nest egg, I would love to create some kind of refurbishing. What's the word? It's not an endowment because that's like a
Mm,
straight investment, but some kind of business
mm-hmm,
that it gives people an opportunity to learn and
mm,
grow, and create some kind of product or whatever that they can then help other people. So it's kind of regenerative.
mm. Sure.
So it creates opportunity for me. My big thing is I know what it feels like to be stuck, and
Yeah.
I want to create environments where people can go, oh my gosh, maybe I don't have to be stuck. And I think there's a lot of people stuck kind of economically, and so maybe it's work, career, whatever. And
Sure.
something around that would be great.
That's great. Really good. If you had to eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Rick's favorite casserole. Um, it's
Yes.
horrible. It is really bad, and it would be bad to do this, but it's spaghetti noodles, Denison's chili hot, Mexican corn with some Velveeta cheese over the top. Please don't tell
Okay.
anybody I said that.
That's funny. Um, what's one challenge that you're facing in your professional life right now?
Um, so what's I think it's still this fear of connecting with people, which
Okay.
that must sound crazy to people, but it's important that I say that. I go to a networking event and I have to do so much emotional work
Mm,
before I go into a networking event to say hi to people and introduce myself
hmm
and have conversations with people and make it about them and blah blah.
hmm
It's really shocking. It's really shocking. So that's where I really struggle.
Yeah, I can relate, especially after the pandemic. It was surprising to me how much anxiety I had just going to a networking event, which
I went to a networking event, but this is like 3 or 4 years ago. I
yeah.
paid to go there, like a lot of money.
hmm
And I literally went there. I was there for 2 hours. I talked to 0 people and I left. Can you imagine
Wow.
how
Gotcha.
that made me feel?
Yeah. Um, what is one thing in your job or your field of expertise that most people don't agree with you about? You hold any
Um,
controversial opinions?
right. Um, I think that if anybody chooses to not work with me, that's my responsibility. And I think as an industry, agents feel like they have their clients, and if they choose not to work with them, that they think it's the client's fault,
Mm,
or they
sure.
they get mad at the client or whatever. And for me, I'm like, well, some way or another, I did not create no like and trust for them. And so
Right.
because people are going to do what they feel like is going to be best for them, generally speaking. And if they
Sure.
didn't choose me, that means that I wasn't the person that they thought
Yeah.
would be the best.
There's a theme of just taking ownership through this whole episode. It's
Yeah, that's
great.
right.
Um, how about a book or two? You've already mentioned at least one book. You have any other books you
So
can
yeah, so
recommend?
the Four Agreements is amazing. A Return to Love is great. There's a follow-up book by the guy who wrote the Four Agreements. That's Don Miguel. Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. is wrote a book called The Mastery of Self. Michael
Hmm,
Singer wrote Untethered. That's really, really great. Living Untethered is another one.
it's great.
Yeah.
What is one question that you wish I had asked that I haven't asked?
I don't know. I think this is a really great podcast. I'm not
That's
feeling
that's
like
the
we
one
left.
where that's the one where I'm fishing for compliments. So that worked perfectly.
Okay,
Um,
good.
um,
Good. I think you did a
but
great job. There's nothing I feel like we didn't get to yet.
awesome. Where can our listeners reach out to you online, Rick?
So Instagram is the Rick Warner. My website address for our coaching company is www.flowcademy.com. And you can always just text me if you want, 415-302-6348. I love getting text messages, but make sure, since I don't know who you are, make it not sound like you're a robot, because I won't reply. So
Absolutely.
reference Jamie's show.
Yeah. And in fact, share this episode with Rick and share it with 10
Yeah,
other of your
even better.
friends.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And in all seriousness, we do appreciate, of course, we appreciate the likes and subscribes and all that, but sharing the episode is also super valuable. And to the listener, please check out our website, Adversity to Abundance, the number 2, adversitytoabundance.com. And Rick, thank you so much for spending your time with us. We know your time is valuable and we appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamie. I had a great time. You're a great podcaster. This was fun. I can't wait to come back, even though you didn't invite me.
You're welcome back.
Okay,
and
great.
To the listener, we appreciate you spending your most valuable resource with us, and that is your time. Thanks, everyone. Take care.